Hi, you're listening to Elizabeth Mulhane, and thanks for joining me. In this session, we're going to have a chat about how we can introduce mindfulness into the classroom. Okay, so I'll just go through a list that I've made some little points here. First of all, we can begin the day with a mindfulness of breath exercise. Um, Change it up. Maybe you could introduce a loving kindness meditation one morning, and that can literally be just 2 minutes getting in touch with the breath, getting in touch with a place of kindness inside. It does not take a long time. Perfect way to start the class. Uh, we can get in touch with just our inner self that wants to focus and be ready to show up for the day in a really focused way. So we're just cultivating a certain state. And we're only using 2 minutes of the classroom time to do that. And as mentioned, we can just do different little breathing exercises. I'll put a link below in the comments to a downloadable of the 14 different breathing exercises that I've got listed on one of my blogs. And by changing up the breathing exercise, we just invite curiosity and interest so they don't get bored. And of course, we keep them just short. It's not about how long they can do it, just whether they can do it. They can come into themselves, focus on their breath, maybe find a settled place or find the focus place, whatever the focus of that little breathing exercise is. Keep it short and simple, and that way it will be enjoyable. They'll have mastery, um, and they'll do it. Okay, so second, we can incorporate mindfulness into existing lesson plans. So we might ask the children to observe what they're thinking through whatever lesson plans you've already got in place. You just you're just injecting that into the lesson plan. Let's take just 30 seconds right now. Go into yourself and notice your state. How do you feel through this lesson? What thoughts might have been coming up for you? How have you dealt with those thoughts? Are you focused, or have you allowed those thoughts to take you away from the focus of the lesson? And who remembers how we bring our focus back? All right, let's do 3 breaths and we'll continue on. So you're just interrupting the lesson as a way of interrupting anyone in the group that has lost their focus, and you're just creating that ability for them to just refocus. All right, 3, incorporate mindfulness breaks throughout the day. So again, if something is a double period or even a 40-minute lesson plan, and you know how hard it can be to focus for 40 minutes. So I'm just going to make sure I don't get cut off. So yeah, we're just making sure that we take those short breaks. So add a breathing technique or calming activity. Even you can even have them have a little journal, have a little writing experience with all lessons, with every lessons, and you can interrupt to say, okay, everyone check in on their state and write one word that will describe your state. Okay, and so throughout the day, they've got this list of words that has described how they've felt throughout the day. That's going to give them a lot of insight. All right, and that's what we want with our mindfulness practice. We want to develop insight and self awareness. We want to learn to observe and to notice our inner experience as well as what's going on outside of us. But obviously that inner experience is really important to really bring our attention to that. Okay, number 4, introduce games and mindful movement. It could be sound awareness, and it could be just a mindful movement, even from the chair, maybe a little bit of stretching. All right, so you're just interrupting the lesson just for a few minutes, and even though we're interrupting here, we're interrupting there, it's actually going to make the lesson a lot more productive because you're taking that little mind break, waking the mind back up through waking the body back up, doing a stretch, from the chair. It's amazing how you can stretch and move the spine, and notice just how that can wake the brain back up. All right, very easy to introduce. Uh, have a little chat about how they can deal with difficult emotions. Maybe it might be a little group chat to see how they're dealing with them, and then introducing different ways. For example, as you've learned through the course, uh, you know, focusing on the breath, focusing on the emotion rather than reacting to it. So if you're dealing with anger, let's notice where that anger is showing up right now. If it's in the face, let's just notice what's happening with those muscles, and that's going to take, it's going to stop the anger from moving forward once we turn around and redirect our focus. So we won't be stuck in the anger, we'll be observing how the anger is affecting us. All right, and of course, we can have a go to already prepared. So if we're dealing with sadness, obviously we want to always just understand that we're not trying to um, shut down and get rid of all our emotions. We're just trying to cultivate them, which includes a time and a place for expressing ourselves. For example, for deep sadness, we're all going to experience deep sadness in life. We're all going to want to cry about things, but then there is a time and a place. And when you're grieving, obviously sometimes if you've been physically hurt, you do want to cry if you feel like crying right there and then. You want to cry later, but there's things, if a tragedy happens in the family, um, and of course, students need to know it's okay if you feel like crying, and you as a teacher need to be mindful that there will be times when some students have a terrible tragedy in the family and they'll have to come to school, and there'll be times where they'll want to just cry. And so that's where your own mindful teaching comes into place, and you need to know what your students are going through, uh, and have that open policy where parents can tell you, and let parents know that they should be telling you if there's something difficult at home. So then you can go to that one particular child and say, look, I know what's going on, and when you feel emotionally overwhelmed and you feel like you're not going to be able to stop the tears, you can just very quietly stand up and walk out of the room. Okay, because that really, really helps when you're trying to deal with something that's just really emotionally upsetting, and you're surrounded by 30 children and you're going to cry. All right, so we've got that reality of it, and then of course we've got that other ability to, let's see if we can just really deep breathe, get through that moment of sadness and not feed it. So that's where we're teaching them, this is how you can deal with your grief. All right, you notice the first feeling of grief, or you notice the first thought of grief, and you are not feeding it with another thought, because that's what turns it into, wanting to cry and really going down in a place where you actually really don't want to. And that's what a child will experience if something terrible has happened and they've got to go to school. They don't want to cry in front of all the children. And so giving them that tool to learn to cultivate and control that emotion, and letting them know it is still important to really let it out at a time when you feel comfortable letting it out. Okay, so yeah, we're just making sure they have the tools. And you can even ask the child to repeat back to you. So, what are you going to do next time you feel that awful sadness welling up and you don't want to let it out? What are you going to do? So they know, um, and it's just a great way for them to have those tools, and of course that's going to go on in all situations in their life. They're developing those coping tools for coping with grief. Okay, so involve parents. You can use this is just in general. If you are really serious about introducing mindfulness and meditation into the classroom, just involve the parents in different ways. Now you've got if you're doing the course, you've got this 10-week program, and this is just a very basic one, but you can, you know, um, let the parents know this week we're focusing on, if you're going to bring in the 10-week wellbeing program through the classroom, which you can do. Just 1 week you're focusing on positive emotion, 1 week you're focusing on engagement, 1 week on interest, on meaning, on purpose, on autonomy, competence, relatedness, positive relationships, accomplishment, and thinking about all the ways that you can make sure that those concepts are coming into the classroom. You might do it just through meditation. You might be able to just simply go through all 10 of those through different breathing exercises. But yeah, you're just getting the parents involved, and you can just ask the parents to do different exercises. You might send home a little note, or just get the children to, write a little note in their homework. Ask mum, the task for this week is to practice a gratitude moment before eating, or to make sure that no one's on their phone through dinner time. Little simple tasks like that, and you're involving the parents, and becomes a really powerful way for the child to embrace mindfulness. You can use artwork and introduce abstract art to express compassion. You might say, we're going to do some abstract art. We're going to use color. Let's use color to express compassion, to express loving kindness, to express gratitude. What color are these things to you? All right, so they're just thinking about these terms, and if you're doing compassion with anyone 10 and under, you probably want to maybe just refresh with the older children as well. Make sure they understand what compassion is. And don't think that you only need to do that once, because compassion is a big word for a primary school child. Even a 10-year-old primary school child may need you to go over and over and over and over and over what that word compassion means week after week, for them to really just remember. So yeah, just realize that. Make sure they do understand the word, and by doing an artwork, they might even write the word compassion, and use color to get that abstract expression going, and maybe draw a picture of them being compassionate in some way. All right. Include books about mindfulness. If you've got a reading list, see if you can find some books that include mindfulness and meditation. In the public group Mindfulness for Children, we've always have, in the files there's a list of children's books that include mindfulness and meditation. And if you do a search, every now and again I say share a book, and there's a ton of books that come up. Allow for moments of stillness, where you just allow the student to just sit quietly. without any expectation. Just 1 minute of just being able to just sit and just be. You're not even asking them to breathe. You're just asking them to just have a moment of just stillness, and it will help them to also just settle and bring that sense of being able to settle. There's no expectations other than just to sit and be for 1 minute. Okay, and after that you might ask them to reflect on what they experienced in that minute. So again, you're bringing just that personal insight. If they've got a little journal, they might want to just write a 1 or 2 sentences on what that experience entailed for them. And as you continue to do that, you'll see that it brings up, a different you each time you experience it. And so that if they write that, then they can say, oh wow, I really go through all these different states throughout the day or throughout the week, and create just a thoughtful mindfulness environment where you yourself are practicing mindfulness and you're taking a calm approach. If you've got a student that is just really causing you emotional turmoil with their behavior, you're registering that within yourself. You're accepting, you're bringing compassion to yourself and being okay with your experience, but you're also cultivating the ability to just remain calm and not scream at that child, and to also remain calm within yourself at that moment when you find yourself feeling time pressure, and then you could easily take that out on a child, and you might not even think that you have, but you may have just raised your voice a bit or spoken really, really firm, and to you it's really appropriate, but to that particular child it may not be. And you may have really overstepped their line of what they feel safe with. And that really depends on each child and their home environment. You might get a child where you could scream the roof off and it really wouldn't affect that child. And he might even roll his eyes, but you could have, because maybe he's used to getting screamed at a lot at home, and so he's habituated. He's not really concerned. He might be intrigued with your loss of control. But then you might have another little boy who you've just spoken firmly to. You just used a firm voice, and he's on edge. He's anxious and he's on edge and he feels like he's disappointed you. He's in trouble. He doesn't know what to do. Okay, because he's never been yelled at and he's just been, raised in this bubble, and he thinks you just having a firm voice is you yelling at him because he's just so not used to it. And so as soon as you have that kind of a child, they can get anxious quite easy. So it's just for you as the teacher to be mindful of that. And you can be mindful in other ways as well. For example, you might just understand that you have teacher bias. That is a thing. And, so when you're marking, if you have to grade work, try not to look at the name, or if you see the name, just push that out of your mind. Consciously say it. The name of this child is going to make no difference to me when I am grading this work in front of me. Okay, because statistically it has been proven how a teacher feels about that child will determine that child's grade, that child's mark, and what you write on that piece of paper. So you really need to try and be mindful of that, and yeah, just get that out All right, so other ways we can introduce mindfulness into the classroom might be going over some of these again, but we're going to just look at it now in terms of subject. So, um, physical education, we can use mindful movement, and we might want to practice syncing movement with breath, which is a great one. It's great for teenage boys as they're getting older, even young boys. It's great for sports and athletes to really synchronize that breath with their movement so they understand that there is a rhythm and there is a cycle. And if you really control your breath, you will run longer distances if you can get that rhythm um, down packed. And, even for swimming, obviously that's a really easy one to see how we need to sync the rhythm, the movement with the rhythm of the breath. And so, older kids, if they're doing weights and things like that, the rhythm of the breath and that conscious awareness can help balance um, and focus on the exact movement and staying conscious of that. Maybe we could just do some mindful walking. You could play around if you're also doing flow form. You might want to go into, core and distal kind of movements, bringing in that Laban framework. Okay, so if you're doing art, we spoke about that before, where you can ask them to use um, abstract painting to express what color compassion is, or you could ask them to use shape to express what sound looks like. Play some sound and have them go to the paper and use shape or color to express that sound. And use words like empathy as well. So we're just really using those words of mindfulness, but they're in an artistic way. So they're doing an art lesson. Science. You could incorporate mindful eating into a science subject. We might want to look at the vitamins in the food we're eating, or take it right into the shape, the sacred geometry, because that can be connected to science, and it also leads on to mathematics as well. Um, but you can look at fruit and see the just the geometry when you're slicing that fruit. There's so many photos available where you can see the geometry in the fruit, the symmetry. And you might want to look at the golden ratio. That's like I really think it's science and maths, because you can bring in how like that spiral is found everywhere in nature. And so we're looking at science and looking at patterns that we can find in science, and then we're looking at how those patterns have mathematical equations, right? Like the golden ratio. So that's a science. And a maths, we can use the Metatron's cube for meditation, which is in the workbook. And then we can bring in the working on just the different shapes and learning the different shapes and where they're found. English, we can have them do a meditation and then journal about it. Okay, so they're just journaling about their experience. One week you might focus on mindfulness of breath, and then the journaling can be about what thoughts popped up, what thoughts interrupted you trying to find your stillness, and how do you feel about that. So you're just getting them to bring that insight in, and we're turning it into a lesson in English. You might want to get them to do a meditation with the mind's eye, and then again ask them to journal about that. And I mean, you can even bring an art project into that as well. So you do a meditation on the mind's eye, ask them to journal about that experience, and then bring that to a piece of art and paint or draw that experience. Okay, I think I'm all wrapped up. Make sure I've got everything that I wanted to say. Yeah, good. Okay, so we're good for time. Don't like to make it too long. Hope you enjoyed the session, and if you have comments, please put them down in the box, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye for now.